Welcome to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based photographer Tabeshima Ayede. I'd like to say, before I begin, thank you very much for those of you who've been listening faithfully from the beginning. I'm really touched and inspired that you guys keep continuing to listen week after week, day after day, whenever the podcast episodes are up. And for those of you who've reached out to say, for those of you who have reached out to share the things that you learned from the podcast, I really appreciate it, and I want to say thank you very much. Now, because of the interaction that I've been having with people one-on-one after the podcast episodes go up, I realized that we need to slow things down a little bit. I've been using a lot of terms in the podcast without properly defining it. I've assumed that because a bunch of us are in business, we know what a lot of these terms mean. So I think I'm going to slow things down a little bit every once in a while to define terms that I've used or terms that we're going to be using regularly. So today I want to go over some terms that we've used interchangeably on this podcast in previous posts. And for those of you who are following me not on the podcast, you're following me on Instagram or on Twitter, terms that I use interchangeably there as well. Now, those terms are the customer, and then the second term is prospect or prospective customer, and then the client or the contact. Now, typically I use all these terms interchangeably because I don't want to run the risk of confusing my listeners or my readers, and so I just use them interchangeably, even though technically speaking they all mean slightly different things. So today I'd like to define some of those terms and give some clarity to it. Now, let's see, ground rules. I am using working definitions whenever I try to define any of these terms, not just today, but in future episodes of the podcast, or for those of you who chill out with me on Twitter or on other mediums. So whenever I define something, I'm only going to use a working definition. A working definition is what I like to call the common man's approach. Those are rough and handy definitions that everybody, the typical man would use, or people in the field would use. So these definitions are not academically correct, and they are not technically correct. So I'm trying to give a rough definition here. I'm not trying to give an academically precise definition. Okay, so let me start off with customer, which is the most common one that I use. Now, a customer is someone who already who gives you regular business, not someone that you have repeated business relations with. For those of you who remember was it English or literature classes or whatever, basically the root word custom. The customer is someone who, through your conduct, you have earned his or her custom, so they keep coming back to you repeatedly. So that's who a customer is. Now, another term that I use interchangeably, the client. This is similar to a customer, although it is often used in a B2B context. That is a business to business context. That is because here you have their how do I put this? Okay, let me just use the word client. I was trying to avoid making a circular definition, but let me use the word client. Okay, so it's similar to the customer, but it's in a business to business context because you have the client's professional interest at heart, or you guys already have a professional relationship in place, which is not always the case in practice when you talk about customers, because sometimes what you have is a personal or maybe a quasi business relationship. So that's the difference between those two terms. One is most often used in a personal context, the other one most often used in a professional business context, although you will find in practice that people often use them interchangeably. Although in the wedding space, I haven't run into any vendor who has said, oh, this bride is my customer. Typically, we say clients in the wedding space. Now, a prospect is someone that you're talking to currently who could become a client or a customer. This is someone who you hope could buy from you in the future, and you guys are currently chatting. You're currently having phone calls or taking meetings or exchanging emails, and both of you are trying to suss each other out to see if it might make sense for you guys to get into a business relationship together. So typically when we go for bridal shows, the people that we run into there are prospects, because they're people that we don't know, but we're talking to them in the hopes that they could become clients, i.e., they could buy from us in the future. So when you run into them at the bridal show the first time, the person is just a prospect. The person is not a customer, the person is not a client. If you seal the deal, the person becomes a client, and hopefully the goal of traditional sales training anyway is to see how you can extend the lifetime value of the relationships that you have. So the goal is typically not just to get the bride and groom to book you for this wedding, but also to make referrals for other weddings to come. Or if you like being open and flexible, in my own case, then I'm open to other things as well: birthdays, housewarmings, naming ceremonies, whatever it is, events generally. So I think we've done customer, we've done client, we've done prospect. Let's see what else. Okay, contact. Yes, the final term, contact. Now, the contact is everyone that you are, how will I say, everyone that you're canvassing, everyone that you're just blanketing messages out to without knowing whether they could be suitable to work with. So if I walk into Brides and Babies, that's the bridal shop that organizes the bridal outfit that organizes the bridal experience wedding fair. That was the last one that held in Abuja in March, to the best of my knowledge. I think that was the last. So assuming I just walk into the outfit on an ordinary day, nothing going on, and I asked to drop a couple of flyers there, basically anybody who comes across one of those flyers is a contact. If they reach out to me at the initial phone call or email or whatever, that person is still pretty much a contact. But as we start vibing, as we start gisting, as we start getting along in the interaction, especially when we get a sense of there might be some need here that I can fulfill, then the person becomes a prospect. And that's pretty much how we walk people up the chain, and we get them to graduate from being a random contact to either being a customer or a client with whom we have long-term relationships. So so those are the terms that we're going to define today. Remember that typically whenever you find me talking about these things, I'm going to be talking about them. I'm going to be using the terms interchangeably, except if you run across me in one of the classes, maybe the classes that we organize with the Posh and Pristine events or with Seed Builders. That's the Abuja Tech Hub. So since that is a learning environment that is geared towards it's a learning environment that is geared towards being more precise. In those cases, yes, I will use the exact, I'll try to use the exact and precise terminology. But typically, whenever I say customer, prospect, clients, or contacts, I usually mean the same thing, the person that you're vibing with. But just remember that there are slight nuances to what these words actually mean. So thank you very much, guys, for listening. I appreciate your attention, especially those of you that have followed from the beginning. Before I sign off, a long-time friend of mine, I'll call him Sarkin Chinya, is getting married today, and I want to wish him a happy married life. Congratulations, my brother. Welcome to the club. We know that your stay here is going to be a wonderful and fun-loving one, and we pray God's graces upon your wedding. May both of you continue to grow in love and continue to grow in friendship. And rest assured that those of us who have gone before you, we are over here anxiously waiting for the patter of tiny feet, which is not to put you guys under pressure. So congratulations, my brother, and thank you very much for listening to the podcast as well. It means a lot to me that you are one of my loyal listeners. So, for the rest of you who have questions, comments, or queries, as usual, you can hit me up on email ayede.taver@gmail.com. That is ayede.taver@gmail.com. Or you can hit me up, text message, phone call, Telegram, WhatsApp, the usual, on 080-6466-2140. For the American audience, don't forget to put the code. I think that's +234. I think it's +234. That's the Nigerian code. And I'm just curious, for those of you American listeners, you currently make up 50% of my audience. I trust that you guys are finding value in this podcast, but I'm just curious, how did you find the podcast, and how come you keep following? Because the podcast is named The Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry. So I just find it curious that even though I have the word Nigerian in the title, let's just say basically I figured that with the way I've titled the podcast, I just thought Nigerians would make up maybe 90% of my listening audience. So I'm not saying you Americans should jump off, but I'm just curious. Why did you hop on in the first place? So my details are there, phone number, email, hit me up and let me know. It'd be nice to hear from you guys. Okay, so for the rest of you, have a wonderful day and catch you all at the next episode. Bye.